In a way, the entire mystic quest of man, all of mankind's spiritual longings, can be looked at through the eyes of these two very intriguing, sheer dynamic figures, Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda. Yes, they were contemporaries. They each had their own approach, but their search for higher truth was the bridge which joined them. You see, when it comes to geniuses, uniqueness, individuality is the most important thing. The genius does not imitate. The genius is their own person. And just in that manner, this is the first thing to understand. Rabindranath Tagore stands apart because he is a genius of an incredibly broad spectrum. And Vivekananda, what do you say of him? Before the age of 40, captured the imagination of the world. And very interestingly, Rabindranath, who went on to live a very long, productive life, in contrast to Vivekananda, was once asked by somebody who wanted to go deep into Indian mysticism, Indian spirituality. So he was asked how he can do it in a relatively short time. How does he grasp the basics, the essence of Indian mysticism and spirituality, which date back 5,000, 6,000 years? And Rabindranath gave a very mystifying answer. He said, study Vivekananda. In Vivekananda, there is all that is positive. There is nothing that is negative. Vivekananda is in sum the idea of the spiritual India, the idea of the rishis, the idea of the highest truth that the Upanishads stand for. So these two characters apparently didn't speak a lot when they met each other. Interestingly, Vivekananda was very fond of singing Rabindranath Tagore's songs when he was a youth. He used to sing it in public occasions. He was known for his voice, and some of his most favorite songs are Rabindranath Tagore's. But somehow in public, they really never acknowledged each other so much. They didn't get into interlocution, they didn't get into conversation. But that's not the point. It harkens back to that meeting between Kabir and Farid. They say they never talked. You see, when two giants come together, it's not necessary for them to make mundane conversation. What can you talk about? You are contemplating the highest truth in your own way. Your mind, your consciousness is soaring so high in the meditative state, and that is their essence. Now let us understand Rabindranath. Rabindranath actually, in a way, encapsulates all the wisdom of Vedanta, all the wisdom of the Upanishads, all the wisdom of the Buddhas, the Tirthankaras, but through the medium of beauty and expression. He remains a poet, he remains an artist. Vivekananda, on the other hand, takes the ascetic approach. He takes the religious approach. So their fundamental approaches to higher reality is different. Rabindranath takes the approach of beauty, expressiveness and beauty. Vivekananda takes the way of the rishis and the munis, the way of asceticism. Through the example of service in life, through the example of renunciation, he teaches. He's a teacher. Rabindranath makes no qualms about his position in life as a poet. Rabindranath has no aspirations to become a spiritual guru, but in a way he is. Vivekananda exemplifies the highest kind of teacher. But what is common between them is the flow of bliss. What is common if you examine the works of Rabindranath and Vivekananda? Let's look at the lessons we can draw from them. Life lessons for dynamic living, for successful living. That is the whole point. Then we'll see that they're just two aspects of the same coin. They complement each other. They are like day and night, alternating. They are like the sunset and the sunrise. Each has its own beauty. What they are joined by is this insistence that the flow of bliss is your very nature. And this is the essence of the Upanishads. Remember this, the flow of bliss is what you are. That is your true nature. When you establish yourself in that, then comes to you the secret of higher living. Then comes to you the secret of transformative living. Then comes to you the dimensions beyond the mind. You see, it's very interesting how Rabindranath used to express himself much like the mystics without religion express themselves. In that way, he's closer to the bowels than he is to the rishis. He does not identify himself with any particular religion. In his youth, yes, he was associated with the Brahmo Samaj, but later in life, he never claimed to draw his lineage from any particular line of thought, any school of or institution of religion. He doesn't claim to have any master. Life itself, existence itself is his teacher. The open sky is his teacher. So in that way, Rabindranath's words are more akin to the Avadut Gita. He talks the language of the Avadut, the one who is free from the formalities of religion, but in a way who signifies the very essence of religion. And that, he says, is the only homecoming we need to come to. We don't need to come home to a particular institutionalized religion. In fact, that is just bricks and mortar. That doesn't mean anything. The idea is to let the consciousness take flight. And when the consciousness takes flight, the entire universe becomes one's temple. The entire universe becomes capable of reflecting the highest truth, the highest beauty, and so on. So do not remain in the neurosis of religion. Come out of the neurosis of religion and leave that tremendous anxiety of wanting to belong to a particular school, wanting to belong to a particular institutionalized encapsulation of truth that is not at all needed. Just sitting silently, doing nothing, you can go into the deepest meditations. Whatever the rishis said, whatever the Buddhas said, can come through your own song, your own manner of living life. Rabindranath does not believe in rules. He believes in mystic realization. He believes that the one thing of immense value is to be yourself, is to not shut yourself away from the beauty, the vast beauty and wonder of life. You see, Rabindranath keeps all his doors and windows of perception open. He doesn't believe in shutting himself out from anything. So there are no rules when it comes to Rabindranath, no shunning of alcohol, no shunning of wine and woman, no moral dogma. There's no moral dogmatic code. Yet life lived very morally is his way. That's the way he lived life. That was the very fount of his creativity. So beauty and creativity and bliss, these are the cornerstones of Rabindranath's way. Now when it comes to Vivekananda's way, we can say that the old classical formula, the Vedantic formula of truth, consciousness and bliss, that can be said to be Vivekananda's way. Sat Chit Ananda. You see, truth is the fundamental quest. And truth, through mysticism, through science, through Vedanta, through understanding the natural workings of the world, not denying the facticity of science. So Vivekananda believed in an all-encompassing truth. He delved deep into science. In fact, it's very interesting how much this person called Nikola Tesla, who of course is responsible for so much of modern world technology, how he absorbed deeply from Vivekananda ideas about energy, ideas about integration of spirituality and science and technology. You see, it was a very cusp period. Vivekananda, when he went to America, the world had just been, they'd had the World's Fair at Chicago. Edison was on the scene. The phonograph and other inventions had come about. There was much happening. Electricity was the talk of the day. And you had people like Edison and Tesla really slugging it out for the future of mankind. One of their most famous arguments was, of course, Edison's insistence on DC, direct current, Tesla's insistence on AC, alternating current, which Tesla was eventually proved right about. But the point here is that Vivekananda emphasized truth in both the scientific and the spiritual dimension. He said religion is no point if it goes against science. It must be in consonance with science. So Vivekananda brings a scientific temper to the quest of religion, the eternal quest of the rishis, the eternal quests of the Buddhas, the eternal quest of the Tirthankaras, the Munis, the Taoists, the Zenists, call it what you will. In a way, he encapsulates not only the Indian way, he encapsulates the searching mystic, the searching monk, the archetype of the searching monk who could be from any tradition in the world, not necessarily the Vedantic one. So Vivekananda's first concern is with truth, Sat. So you see, versus Rabindranath's first insistence is on beauty. Vivekananda's first insistence is on Sat, truth. And then, of course, consciousness, Chitta. Consciousness as being the total subject of the Veda, the Vedanta, and so on. It is all about consciousness. In the Dhammapada, the Gautam Buddha says, as your mind is, so shall be everything. You are the creator of your own destiny. And it is the quality of consciousness which creates the merit of a thing. So Buddha went so far as to say, even if you commit a crime in the right state of consciousness, it's perfectly okay. In a way, it's an indirect teaching, because if you are in the right state of consciousness, you will not commit something which is anti-life. Being in the state of correct consciousness will take you to correct living, will take you to moral living. Don't put the cart before the house. A horse, put the horse before the cart, and that horse is your horse of consciousness. Chitta. So Vivekananda used to insist on the cleansing of the chitta. And naturally, for people in this material sphere of life who are perhaps we are not so morally evolved as Vivekananda, there are certain ways of life, certain disciplines, which he felt would help people. And one of those most important disciplines, he used to say, is service. If you serve others, you grow in your own sense of responsibility. It becomes worship. Service is worship. So he brought this very dynamic idea, which actually didn't exist in Indian spirituality so much. It was there in Western spirituality, the idea of service and work together, service and worship together. But in Indian mysticism, the work of the monk was not so much service. The work of the monk was moksha, the quest for moksha, the quest for nirvana, the quest for mukti, the quest for enlightenment and spiritual liberation. So really Vivekananda took it away from there. And he said, no, we must absorb this important lesson, which is that we must equate service with worship. So he brought about a fundamental change, a revolutionary change in the Vedantic vision. And the third thing, of course, is bliss, Ananda. Without Ananda, there is nothing. Ananda is supposed to be the substratum of all of existence. Joy in the whole being of the universe. Joy being the whole basis of that hidden hand which is behind the universe. And joy being the substratum of our own inner being. So naturally, being a Vedantin, the concept of Ananda has to have a lot of importance in Vivekananda's worldview. And because we are not islands, because we exist as part of the social sphere, our Ananda has the ability to get transferred onto others. Our sense of bliss has the ability to cross over and to create bliss in the heart of others also. So this extraordinary sense of happiness that we can create in others' lives is really the work for the monk. is really the work for the spiritual seeker. It's not only about self-enjoyment in bliss, but it's about the ability to communicate this bliss to others. And that itself is a service. That itself is yoga. That itself is the higher yoga. You see, the one way of yoga is this very self-oriented exercise, this very self-oriented quest for one's body, mind, spirit well-being. But the greater yoga is to make all of life such a dance, such a song of bliss, that becomes contagious. Others too can find that release of joy from you. And when they find that, your own life becomes more and more valuable, more and more meaningful. So this insistence upon eternal bliss as the ultimate reality of all things is the very crux of Vivekananda. It is the very crux. And his very name means an awareness of the higher. You see, Vivekananda. It's very interesting. Awareness of bliss. Vivekananda. And he, in a way, he chose his own name. Remember that. So essentially, Vivekananda itself, the word itself means awareness of the highest bliss. And that's the credo he carried out in his own life. In myriad ways. You see, Vivekananda was not one to rest on his laurels. He could have easily set himself up in New York and all of America would have come to him to consult with him. People like John D. Rockefeller were coming to consult with him. But he chose to move on, Charayavati, as the Aitreya Upanishad says, as the Gautam Buddha himself said. So he said the way of the monk is to keep moving. He said, because if I plant myself here in New York, I'll just become this great big guru, and that is not my way. The only guru is my master, Sri Ramakrishna. I'm just a humble servant. I'm just a teacher. I'm just a sharer of his teachings. I'm just an instrument of his music. He's the player. So Vivekananda remained humble. Vivekananda never sought authorship of his teachings. And Rabindranath, of course, being an artist, liked his artistic signature on what he did. An artist craves most of all artistic signature. So Rabindranath, each song, his each work, his each play, his each essay has his signature. Vivekananda is more like the stream of the unknown rishis who've just come and gone and left their imprint on man, but who don't really claim authorship. They say nothing is ours. We are just beggars. In that way, Vivekananda is completely profound. In that way, Vivekananda has been a great magical force. He's this great magical force of energy. If you understand Vivekananda truly, you'll find a great creative, blissful rush in your being. You'll find this flowering of energy. You'll find that he's been so pure in his own motivations in life that it can bring a tear to your eye. Find the clarity of vision. Find the clarity of vision to see the essence of Vivekananda. Find the clarity of vision to see the essence of Rabindranath. And then you'll see that through these two children of Bengal, these two boys who were born within Bengal soil, have really traversed the entirety of human quests. The human quest for higher truth through mysticism, through poetry, through the arts, through the sciences, through the mystical disciplines. All of it they have traversed. And in a way, the future of man can never ignore these two people. Their stature, their work will continue to grow. You see, they carry the very soul of the flame of spirituality. The flame, that is important. It is not the institution which is ultimately important. The institution comes and goes. What is truly important is the light of consciousness that the enlightened being can convey to others, and that flame can get transferred into the other's heart. It's that flame of consciousness, the sudden leap of understanding, clarity, can be done through contemplating on these two characters. And you can find yourself reborn with a great creative zeal, reborn with a great creative courage, as if nothing can block you, nothing can hinder you. The divine purity of Rabindranath's creative work and the divine simplicity of Vivekananda's life. Both of these teach us what? They teach us spontaneity. The energy of spontaneity, the energy of being innocent in one's actions in life. Both these beings were very childlike also. They had a very childlike wonder towards existence. So that is the next thing to understand. And they lived in the moment, they lived in the present. They were not so concerned about trying to tell people how to be, making people move towards success and so on. No, none of those things. They said, if you can live your life with awareness, if you can live your life through singing the own beauty of your song, through the meditative consciousness of yourself, then you'll find the higher reaches of your mind. Then you'll find the higher reaches of your soul. And then you'll find the joy that is infinite. And what else matters? That in essence is the entirety of mysticism. You can see that Rabindranath and Vivekananda were both very ancient, established in the old ancient echoes of the mystic search, but at the same time men of the future. People who were immensely dynamic, who looked to the future, who looked to newness, who looked to youthfulness as defining all things. Rabindranath used to talk about existence itself as being very youthful, ever in a creative state. So the idea of God in Rabindranath's poetry, his songs, his thousands of songs, it's of a constantly creative God, an ageless God, not an old God, a youthful, fresh God. In fact, Rabindranath was against ideas of religion that was contemporary during his time. He felt that religions were repressive. You see, he never quite spoke up against religions as such, but it was his whole vision which was eloquent enough to speak out against it. He had a new vision for man. He said that religions have created a split in people, in humanity. Religions are forces of division between man and man. They are a bondage. The real way is the mystical way, where you transcend institutionalized aspects of religion. Now, Vivekananda, on the other hand, because he worked within the domain of religion, for example, he went to Chicago for the World Parliament of Religions. He was working in the religious domain. So his idea was to catalyze the confluence of religions. At that level he was working. Rabindranath was free from that level because he was never in that domain as such. He was not a theologian. He was not a person who belonged to any particular school of thought. Neither was he a Vedantin, as Vivekananda was. You see, Vivekananda also carried a legacy. He carried the responsibility of the entire lineage of Vedanta over thousands of years. So Vivekananda really had that on his shoulders. He had to speak from that pulpit. He had to speak from the pulpit of religion. Rabindranath's pulpit was the pulpit of nature. His was looking at the world as one entire commune, which is to become intoxicated with higher truth, higher beauty, and so on. So the wine of Rabindranath Tagore is freely available to all through the medium of the arts. With Vivekananda, it would not be right to call it wine at all. You can call it elixir. You can call it nectar. He was distributing nectar. Rabindranath's way was one almost of a divine intoxication, a divine madness with the sheer beauty and wonderment of life. Vivekananda's way was of kindling light within people so that they can go thousands of miles on their own pathway through the power of that self-torch. As Gautam Buddha says, Apo Dipo Bhava. And it's about kindling the light within yourself. And Vivekananda was helping people kindle that light. And he believed in institutions. Now, it's very interesting that they both created institutions of very different kinds. Rabindranath, of course, founded Viswabharati at Shantiniketan, the university. And the university, naturally, because it went into the hands of the government, it just became an absolute nonsensical representation of what Rabindranath stands for. The Vishwabharati of today has nothing to do with Rabindranath Tagore. It is just an ordinary institution in Bengal, which really is not truly representative of the confluence that he talked about. It is ridiculous. It is absolutely a betrayal of his entire vision of expanded consciousness. It has become an ordinary academic place. Even the arts in Viswabharati are academic. Even the dances are academic. They're so academic that the spirit of the thing is missing. The dignity of the thing is missing. Each professor is guarding their own domain. You see, Rabindranath got caught up in this entire problem, which is the inevitable bane of academia in our country. It gets caught up in governmental morasses. It gets caught up in academic politics. And there's nothing worse than politics in academia. Now, Vivekananda, on the other hand, created an institution, the Ramakrishna Mission. And because the Ramakrishna Mission is really based upon a Vedantic essence, it is still by far and large far better run than most institutions, than most religious institutions. And in a way, because its mandate is not entirely religious, it is also about social service more than religion. It is also about the idea of India, the seed subtle form of Indian spirituality, and disseminating those seeds of mysticism within the world, which is why it has remained more relevant vis-a-vis Viswabharati, for example. But at the same time, the Ramakrishna Mission does not totally do justice to the ideas of Sri Ramakrishna, for example. Sri Ramakrishna was not so interested in sending his monks out to do service for others, no. His idea was more akin in that way to what Rabindranath was talking about, what Rabindranath has exemplified through his songs and music and so on. It's about divine intoxication. It's about going deep into the mystic search and not about institutions at all. So in a way, these are interwoven sort of a narrative, you see. It's interesting how Rabindranath's songs often carry more of the spirit of Ramakrishna than the Ramakrishna Mission monks will ever be able to tell you about Sri Ramakrishna. It's very interesting. I personally find more of Ramakrishna in Rabindranath's works than you can find in the tombs and tombs of literature that the Ramakrishna Mission monks keep churning out. Or they're rather theological lectures which are steeped in a morass of Sanskritized jargon. You see, it's very easy to use, to dig up a lexicon of Sanskrit words and to have a lexicon of Vedanta, for example, and keep talking about different big words which relate to Vedanta. It's very rich in that manner. But the root, the spirit is not there as much as you can find in a simple song of Rabindranath Tagore. That carries the ecstasy, that carries the sheer beauty of Sri Ramakrishna's mystical message. So really, it's the blossoming of bliss which is the essential thing. Now, of course, Vivekananda's life was cut short. You see, you could say his most productive years might have been ahead of him. He was a religious man who was so young when he passed away. While religion is a domain which people really excel at become famous for in later years. Now, there are aberrations. For example, Jesus of Nazareth is an aberration. He died at 33, he was crucified at 33. Similarly, Adi Shankaracharya died very young. And Vivekananda comes from that lineage. He comes from that similar sort of, impressionability at a very young age, which is a very rare thing in the domain of religion. Rabindranath's world fame actually started much later in his later life. His world fame did not really start till a later stage of his life. But then it flowered and flourished to the extent that he became arguably one of the most famous people of his entire lifetime within the world. And he could explore poetry, he could explore music without boundaries because of his travels. You see, so he's considered almost a personification of a Zen monk in Japan. In Japan, he was revered till he actually went and attacked the aggressive political policies of Japan. For example, their invasion of Manchuria, their military excesses, their misinterpretation of the Bushido code of the samurai when they became an aggressive country. So he lost his credibility in Japan. In China, similarly, he'd become immensely popular. In fact, I have a friend in China who teaches English there. He's an Englishman. He tells me that Stray Birds is the highest selling book after Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. You see, naturally, Mao's book is compulsory. It sells the most. And Stray Birds is immensely popular. So who would have thought that Rabindranath would make such an impression in communist China as well? So that's the thing about Rabindranath. He doesn't talk about any ideology as such. He doesn't talk about any political ideology as such, and that keeps him immensely pure. So Rabindranath transcends ideologies, be they religious ideologies, be they political ideologies, and so on. His only ideology, if at all, is that of beauty, perception of beauty. In that way, he is more akin to the Taoist masters like Chuang-Tzu and Lao Tse. He is more akin to the Japanese Zen poets like Basho, whose very concern is with beauty, whose very concern is with the light within the world. That sacred light which is scattering on every blade of grass, on every dewdrop, on every leaf and petal. So that is the real poetry, and Rabindranath lived his life as if it was poetry. Vivekananda was a much tougher life in that way. Vivekananda chose the way of complete abstinence. Now, he never abstained from many things. For example, he had alcohol. He used to smoke a cigar. But his life was incredibly disciplined. Now, even while he was smoking, for example, he would smoke what was with him, but he would not carry the smokes around, you see. So his was the way of the monk, where you accept what you get, but you do not hanker about the tomorrow. You're not worried about the tomorrow. You're almost like the Jain Muni who absolutely gives no thought to the morrow. You accept in Diksha, you accept as a beggar monk, you accept. And he used to call himself a beggar monk. You accept whatever comes. You make use of, partake of it, what is offered to you. But like a river, you flow on, you move on. And you don't let that water stick. You see, a river's water keeps moving. If you put your leg into the river, same water doesn't cross you twice. It's fresh waters, and that is the way of the monk. So certain ideas about monkhood were carried within Vivekananda, which differentiates him entirely from Rabindranath Tagore, whose way is of utter freedom from all dogma, from all moral disciplines and so on. Vivekananda used to say that his only real moral discipline is that of brahmacharya. The vow of brahmacharya was non-negotiable to him. Everything else was all right. His master gave him the permission to eat meat and so on, because Sri Ramakrishna knew that Vivekananda would be teaching in a Western milieu. He had foreseen it, and he realized that for Vivekananda to be an effective teacher, he must free him from these small bonds. For example, if he had insisted on Vivekananda turning vegetarian, it would not have been possible for Vivekananda perhaps to survive very difficult days in the West, when eating anything would become difficult for him. But he could survive because he was not bound down by very, very strict monastic vows. Yes, it was the one vow of brahmacharya, of abstinence from the sexual acts, which kept him completely, absolutely, and utterly individually unique. You see, I have never encountered a person who is absolutely so deeply in relationships of different sorts with women, with Western women in that particular age, an Indian man in that particular age, who is literally deified by them. But at the same time, the affection is that of a sister. The affection is that of a mother. He commanded that kind of affection. His aura was such that nobody would even look at him with the eyes of a lover. Now, Rabindranath, on the other hand, used to have a lot of romantic admirers around him. It's arguable, it's debatable about what he indulged in, what he didn't indulge in. It doesn't even matter, because his life was so pristine, it was so pure, it was so dynamic, and the creative strain of his life was so dominating and powerful that hardly ever thought would move on to that, you see. Apart from a few perverted mindsets who insist on Rabindranath's moral downfall and so on, which is an absolute load of rubbish, because they're not able to see into the depths of the man. They're not able to see into the vastness of the man. So Rabindranath's way, we can see in a nutshell, is about rejoicing in life. Rejoice. The more you rejoice, the more comes to you, and share your rejoicing with others. That is the only thing you can share. Share your dance, share your song. Through that is service to others. Vivekananda is a more concrete sort of a service. He says, look at everyone as if they are Narayan, look at everyone as if they are God. And through doing that, you come into a very service-oriented relationship with others. You're constantly trying to be of value to others. So the whole tradition of Ramakrishna Mission is how they can be of value to society, how they can be of value to society at large. In that way, that's the way of the Bodhisattva, where you are not completely concerned about your liberation, but you're also concerned about taking others onto liberation. You're helping others. That's the way of the Bodhisattva. The way of the Arhat is self-liberation, self-bliss, and so on. So in a way, Rabindranath exemplifies the way of the Arhat. And ultimately, there's no difference. The Arhat is also a Buddha. The Bodhisattva is also a Buddha. It's just that the paths are a little different. The bliss is the same. It's just a question of whether one is celebrating one's own expression, one's own beauty of expression, or one is more concerned about making others celebrate that. But there again, it's not like a line written stone. It's more like a line written water. For example, Rabindranath used to say that even if all his teachings go, if all his works go, his essays, everything goes, his songs will remain. So the crystallization of Rabindranath's message is through his creative works, his songs mainly, his poetry secondly. And the crystallization of Vivekananda's work is through encapsulation of all of the old ancient Vedantic concepts in a new modern form, which continues through the Ramakrishna Mission and so on. So, and of course his seminal books like Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. And so what Vivekananda could do was that he could crystallize this entire massive mass of learning from different philosophies of India, be it Vedanta, be it Sankhya, be it Bhakti, be it Raja Yoga, and so on, and crystallize them into an understandable, accessible form. For the first time, you had somebody doing that in a modern idiom. And that became very important because Hinduism is like an ocean, it is so vast. So what Vivekananda could do was he could take that water from that ocean called Hinduism and he could distill it into a purity of form. And that distilled water is what has kept Hinduism going and has kept that stream of the highest philosophical thoughts in Hinduism alive, which is Vedanta in a way, which is Sankhya in a way, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. These are the distilled versions of his entire learning. He had a absolutely encyclopedic grasp of all subjects. Most subjects, to the extent that he's written in the New York Medical Journal, you see. He's written about science there. So he's a great reservoir of ideas beyond belief, precocious-minded. And he's able to distill that not only in a mystical way, but in a scholarly way, in a theological way also. So his work has theological merit. With Rabindranath, of course, the search is for bliss, the search is for beauty. So he never really encapsulates those truths in a particular jargon, a particular language of religion. No, he couches it in the language of poetry, in the language of dance, in the language of that is his religion. That is his entirety of his mystic message. So in a way, Vivekananda's approach is a little more scientific. It is a little more. It is a little more academically more differentiated. It is bringing together concrete ideas about different philosophies. Rabindranath's is almost like the fragrance of the flower. You see, you can't define the fragrance. It is a subtle thing. But nonetheless, it exists. So fragrance has no color. It just has a feeling of smell. You can't quite define it. It's not like Vivekananda is like the fruit. You can measure the dimensions of the fruit. You can taste it. You can describe its taste and so on. Rabindranath is more like the fragrance of the flower. It's difficult to bottle, it's difficult to productize, it's difficult to define, but it's there nonetheless. So it's very interesting, this entire Rabindranath versus Vivekananda. And it's not verses so much, it is putting them in juxtaposition so that we can understand the entirety of mysticism as such. And that is the most important thing. That keeps these two characters eternally interesting. And that keeps their relationship, their very personification of higher truth so interesting.